News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow.
Karen, we begin with an escalation in the feud between the Trump administration and Fed Chair Jay Powell. This time, the Justice Department is involved. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us with the very latest. John.
And Nathan, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says the U.S. Central Bank has been served grand jury subpoenas from the Justice Department threatening a criminal indictment. Powell made the announcement in an extraordinary video statement released last night.
This unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure.
The Trump administration last summer ramped up scrutiny over the Fed's renovation of two buildings and rising costs associated with the project. But Powell says that is just pretext to end Fed independence.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
In an interview with NBC News Sunday, President Trump denied having any knowledge of the investigation into the central bank. Well, the president has repeatedly called for aggressive rate cuts and has repeatedly mused about firing Powell. At the end of last year, Trump said he was considering a gross incompetence lawsuit against Powell. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. Well, Bloomberg News has learned Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte was a driving force behind the Trump administration's decision to subpoena the Federal Reserve. Pulte has been a vocal force within the administration investigating Trump's foes for mortgage fraud. He also submitted a criminal referral to the DOJ about Fed Governor Lisa Cook that is at the root of Trump's push to fire her. The latest Fed subpoena has drawn criticism from Democrats like Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina. Tillis says he will oppose the confirmation of any nominee for the Fed until the legal matter is fully resolved. Nathan, Sell America sentiment is sweeping through markets today after the Trump administration escalated its attacks on the Federal Reserve. The dollar, treasuries, and U.S. equity futures are all sliding in early trading. The sell-off revives debate over just how far the president can and should influence the nation's rate stance, which in recent decades has been insulated from political interference so as to ensure price stability. Gold and silver, in turn, trading at record highs this morning.
In the Middle East, Karen, Iran's foreign minister says security forces have, quote, full control of the country after 2 weeks of ongoing upheaval. Activists say at least 540 people have been killed so far in the latest waves of protests in Iran. President Trump says he is closely monitoring the situation and considering potential military options.
We're looking at it very seriously. The military is looking at it, and we're looking at some very strong options.
President Trump also says the regime's leaders have contacted the U.S. for negotiations. Iran's parliament speaker has this warning if the U.S. chooses to strike.
Given your explicit admissions regarding your intention to carry out military aggression against Iran within the framework of legitimate self-defense, we do not consider ourselves limited to reacting only after an attack occurs, and we will act based on concrete indications of threat.
And that was Iran's parliament speaker speaking through an interpreter. Communications in Iran remain largely cut off, and that has made it difficult to track the full scope of the protest movement.
Nathan, let's turn to new developments now involving Greenland. Danish broadcaster TV2 says top diplomats from Denmark and Greenland will meet Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington on Wednesday. Denmark is banking on the meeting to defuse President Trump's renewed push on Greenland, and the president insists ownership of the island is a key issue.
Look, if we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will, and I'm not letting that happen. If we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will take Greenland, and I am not going to let that happen.
Is there any deal they can offer you?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to make a deal with them. It's easier. But one way or the other, we're going to have Greenland.
Meanwhile, Bloomberg News has learned a group of European countries led by the UK and Germany is discussing plans for a military presence in Greenland.
Meanwhile, Karen, President Trump is signaling he is leaning toward excluding ExxonMobil from his push for U.S. oil majors to rebuild Venezuela's petroleum industry. He says he is displeased with the company's response to his initiative. Reviving the oil industry and undoing years of underinvestment and mismanagement in Venezuela would, by some estimates, require $100 billion and take a decade.
And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.